Hey, what's happening, everybody? It's me, Crazyfrankie, and I'd like to welcome you to my Week 3 4 key game picks. Before we get into week number 3, I don't know what to even put into thoughts of what happened in week number 2, but let me tell you, there were teams that really were basically stunned last week. And I'm not just talking about one particular NFL team, obviously, the Eagles. That Eagle game, what happened with the Falcons, that's a whole topic of its own after what happened. The only quick thing I'm going to say about that football game was that I don't know what Nick Sirianni was thinking, calling a passing play on third down when he could have just handed off to Saquon Barkley. Instead, they went for a pass to Saquon, and he drops it. That was a devastating loss for the Eagles. And as the Falcons came back in the final minute and beat them at the buzzer, that to me, that loss is not on Saquon. That loss is not on Jalen Hurts. That's on Sirianni. You call a pass when really that's a run situation. You run the ball. You basically take more time off the clock because during that time, that third down play, the Falcons were out of timeouts. You should have burnt more time. The more time you could have burned, obviously you would have gone for the field goal anyway, but instead you leave too much time for Kirk Cousins and he burns you. That to me is just a devastating loss for the Eagles, and now basing on their upcoming games, they're in a must-win situation right now going in. And you look at other teams that obviously that were a bit of a shocker too. Obviously, when you think about like the Cowboys getting whooped by the Saints or Baker Mayfield basically sticking it to the Lions, barely winning by 4 points. The Ravens going 0-2, losing to the Raiders of all teams. And you got to wonder, how has this become an issue now for the Ravens when they're technically are one of the top 10 teams as a Super Bowl favorite? Not only that, you also got the Chiefs barely squeaking by the Bengals, which I thought that game was going to be a much bigger blowout. But in the end, the Bengals played them so well last week, and yet they got snake bit by the refs again, which was not a surprise. And once again, the Bengals off to another slow start. There was a lot that went on in week number 2. Basically, it's its own topic. I mean, it was just unbelievable what happened in week number 2. There were a lot of shockers. There were some good games, some unexpected results and all. But really, I mean, obviously, an even bigger story where obviously what happened with Tua. He ended up getting a concussion again. It's just unfortunate for the Dolphins right now. They're in a really difficult position right now. What to do with a quarterback going forward. We don't know what Tua is going to be. He said he doesn't want to retire. I mean, obviously he loves the game of football, but personally, I mean, look, I can't speak for him or anybody else, but personally, I really think that he should retire because his health is more important. And when you have that many concussions, you basically could be incapacitated in the future. And who knows if another one could be fatal. I don't know. I mean, I can't speak for him. He made his decision and all that, and basically that's all on him. I mean, it's kind of hard. I mean, I wish him the best, but it is the game of football. And obviously the Bills going 2-0, defeating the Dolphins, that was an even bigger surprise too in week number 2. Anyways, we need to get into week 3 now. Too many things went on in week number 2. Obviously, that's a segment of its own. But now we need to get into week 3. All right, I'm going to go a little bit different this week because obviously there's some games that probably will get the most attention. But I'll go a little bit different on this, and I'll try to explain this to you as I talk about these games. All right. Why don't we start with key game number 1, and that is the Houston Texans versus the Minnesota Vikings. The Texans are a slight 2.5-point favorite given the fact that the Vikings and Sam Darnold have somehow got into a 2-0 start. And obviously, when I look at the Texans, they barely beat the Bears 19-10. TJ Stroud just went 23 of 36, 260 yards, 1 touchdown. Luckily, he didn't turn the ball over. He didn't turn the ball over with interceptions. There was a fumble in the game that was basically on the offensive line that caused it. But I look at this Texan team right now, CJ Stroud. Their first 2 games didn't. I mean, a lot of people are going to say this Texan team is for real and all that. I'm going to be completely honest with you. For some reason, I don't know if it's just me, but I'm noticing that the Texans are starting off pretty slow. They barely beat the Colts in week 1 by 2 points, and they beat the Bears 19-10, which really wasn't that much dominance in these two games. And now with the Minnesota Viking team that they have to go to Minnesota in this game, and a Vikings team that is full of confidence right now. Sam Darnold really rejuvenating in his first two starts. I mean, last week 17 of 26, 268 yards, 2 touchdowns, even though he got picked in that game. But that offensive line really did a great job of making sure he doesn't get sacked. He didn't get sacked. He only got sacked a couple times in that game, but his offensive line did a good job. There is going to be question marks in what will happen with J.J. Jefferson. It's really gonna be hard to say if he's gonna play in this game because that is a major factor. That is a major factor going into this game. When I look at both teams, the Texans I'm giving them more of a slight advantage because they are still more healthier. Because there's a lot of questions if Jefferson's gonna play in this football game after the beating he took last week. This really is a battle of two unbeaten teams at 2-0 this early in the season. It's a very tough pick. This is a 50-50 toss-up here. I cannot really say who wins this football game here. But I have to make a pick in this football game, and I'm going to go with the Texans. They have much better weapons, especially now having to utilize Stephon Diggs now for C.J. Stroud. And it's really a tough pick because this game could go either way, in all honesty. But I'm going to pick the Texans. I think the Texans, this might be the defining moment for this team here this season. It's a tough pick. In Minnesota, you got to wonder with Justin Jefferson, how healthy he really is. And Sam Darnold, I mean, he's going to have to find some other targets too. And they got to get the running game going because the running game didn't do much last week against the 49ers, even though they got the victory. But I think the Texans are slightly better. They're more healthier than the Vikings are. And I think the Texans will barely squeak out a victory over the Vikings. It should be a good one in Minneapolis, but I think the Texans will slightly beat the Vikings in this one here. I'm going to pick the Texans at -2.5. Texans over the Vikings. Key game number 2. Another battle of 2-0 teams. And one of them is a bit surprising. And I'm talking about the Chargers versus the Steelers. And why do I say this is surprising? It's the Steelers. Justin Fields has done a fantastic job in the first two starts when really Russell Wilson was supposed to be the starter. Justin Fields last week against, well, let's be real. I mean, the Steelers were facing a really crappy Broncos team. And to make a note, they barely beat them last week. Justin Fields, 13 of 20, 117 yards, 1 touchdown, and no interceptions. Let me just put the odds in this one here. Believe it or not, the Steelers are actually a 1.5-point favorite in this one here. I have a feeling this game will go down to 1 or might go to you pick 'em status before kickoff here because these two teams are evenly matched, to be quite honest with you, in terms of the players that they have, because these two teams are really not dominant. I mean, when I talk about going to the Chargers here, they got lucky with the Raiders when the Raiders really gave them a football game, to be quite honest with you. The Chargers were pretty sloppy against them, and they didn't really totally dominate the Panthers last week. They only scored 26 points. And right now the Chargers, there's some huge question marks now with Justin Herbert again with his hand. He got hit late in the fourth quarter, and now there's some question marks. And this was throwing hand too. Now, if you're a Chargers fan, this includes me because I do follow this team pretty closely. Anybody who knows me on a personal level. Now you got to wonder how healthy his hand is because I'm having some question marks now going into this football game. Because Justin Herbert went 14 of 20, 130 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 1 interception last week. They really weren't that dominant last week. They were fortunate to score 26 points, but other than that, this team has a lot of issues they need to clean up. A lot of things they need to clean up, and this is crucial. I mean, the Chargers, I feel, are in a must-win game, even though it's only week 3. The only reason why I say that is because the Chiefs are coming up, and they have to figure out a way to clean up some of the mistakes they've had in the first 2 weeks. And to me, that doesn't look good. And Justin Herbert's health now is a question mark, given the fact he hurt his hand last week. It really pains me to do this as a Chargers fan, but I'm giving a slight edge to Pittsburgh because really, when I look, I don't like to do like against the spread or anything else for that matter, but given the history with the Chargers against the Steelers, it's been bad. I mean, the only big victory they've ever had against the Steelers was really, you have to go back to the 94 AFC Championship. That was really their only biggest victory they ever had against the Steelers. Other than that, the Chargers have been awful. They've been awful against the Steelers. And even though Pittsburgh's not the same team, they're not really that much dominant. I'm picking the Steelers. There's question marks with that offensive line with the Chargers. Justin Herbert's hand is now a question mark. We don't know how healthy he is. I hate to say it. I don't like doing this. I really don't. But I got to go with the Steelers in this one here. I think the Steelers, they're a bit more healthier, and T.J. Watt is going to be a factor in this game too. If they can't hold T.J. Watt at bay, I have the Steelers barely beating the Chargers in a low-scoring game. This is going to be a low-scoring game here. I'm going to pick the Steelers at 1.5. This could go to you pick'em status before kickoff, but we don't know yet. You have to wait till Sunday to find out. Pittsburgh minus 1.5 against over the Chargers. All right, now going into key game number 3 and 4, I'm going to go a little bit different here. These two games I'm going to talk about, I felt are must-win games for some particular football teams. Let me first get in with the Eagles against the Saints. The Saints are 2.5-point favorite in this one here, and I would say that's about right. They are playing at a very extreme high confidence right now. Derek Carr was 11 of 16, 243 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. Basically, their defense really did more of the damage to the Cowboys than the offense did. But when you put up 41 points, the Saints look like they could be the team to beat in the NFC. And why not? I mean, given the fact that the Buccaneers and Baker Mayfield going 2-0 as well, that matchup between them and the Saints down the line, it's going to be really big. But talking about Eagles and the Saints here, I don't really need to get in more with the Eagles now. I explained it earlier in the video. Justin Hurts was only 23 of 30. Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts was 23 of 30, 183 yards, 1 touchdown, and 1 interception. And despite the fact that Sirianni's play calling in the end of that football game against the Falcons was awful. And to only make matters worse right now, the defense could not stop the Falcons all night long. They really struggled against the Falcons, and I hate to say this, in a game that the Eagles absolutely have to have here against the Saints, they're in for trouble. Because the way the Saints are playing right now, they're playing at a very high level here, and I'm picking the Saints. The Eagles need to really fix up a lot of things in their defense here, and they haven't fixed it. They struggled against the Packers last week. They struggled against the Packers offense, and they struggled against the Falcons offense. And just think of the way the Saints are playing right now, how they're going to do with them. I hate to say this, the Saints are pretty much going to win this football game here. The Eagles have problems, and they better fix it fast before they face the Cowboys soon. I'm picking the Saints in this one here. I just think the Saints, they have a little bit of a better defense, and their offense is really getting in a groove. Derek Carr is lighting it up, and Kamala has really done a good job. I'm trying not to make politics here. Sorry. Kamala really went off last week as well as Derek Carr did against the Cowboys. Saints 2.5 over the Eagles. And finally, key game number 4, the Ravens versus the Cowboys. This is a must-win football game more for the Ravens as much as the Cowboys is. Both these teams need this game. Let's be real. Lamar Jackson was 21 of 34, 247 yards, 1 touchdown, and 1 interception. Dak Prescott was 27 of 39, 293 yards, 1 touchdown, and 2 interceptions. Both teams did not play well against their opponents last week. And really the issues going on with that for the Ravens defense is a huge question mark going into this game. I mean, they pretty much dominated the Raiders for 3 quarters and then for the first half of that game, and then in the second half, they fell apart. And you give the fact that the Cowboys are probably really angry right now, given the fact that they got humiliated at home against the Saints. You don't think they're going to want some blood in this game. Both teams are about evenly matched here, and obviously it's going to determine which offense really provides some sort of playmaking here, because obviously the defense for both teams are now big question marks. Because I felt like the Ravens issues here. Obviously they're dealing with a new offensive coordinator, new staff members and all that. But really right now, they should be really a much better football team than what their record says right now. And obviously the Ravens are dealing with some injuries as well. But when I look at this football game here, I'm picking the Cowboys here. The Cowboys to me look like they're out for some blood here. They want to get back on track here. And if the Ravens go 0-3, their season, no question, may be in jeopardy, could be over, given the fact that they haven't had a victory yet this season. It's really a toss-up who wins this football game here because both teams are about evenly matched the way they played in the first 2 games, in the first 2 weeks of the regular season. I think, to me, the Cowboys are a little bit better. I think they will probably get back on track here in this football game here. I mean, the Ravens have bigger problems than the Cowboys do. And that's why I'm going to pick the Cowboys +1 in this one here. Ravens are only a 1-point favorite in this one here, and that's more likely going to be you pick 'em status as well. But I'm going to go with the Cowboys in this one here. I think the Cowboys at +1 will find a way to beat the Ravens here. It's going to be a tight ball game all the way, but I think the Cowboys will barely squeak out a victory against the Ravens because the Ravens got a lot of problems on both sides of the ball, and they better fix it fast before it gets really ugly later on in the season for them. I'm picking the Cowboys over the Ravens. All right, everybody, that wraps up my 4 key game picks for week number 3. Please check the description below for all of my week number 3 picks, and I'll talk to you guys next week when I make my picks for week number 4. Take care, everybody, and enjoy your football weekend.